Anyway, I was fascinated to hear of Professor Tonya Gray, Professor Tonya Gray from the University of Western Sydney, who has done, I think, a lot of work on the subject of play. She's on the line. Professor, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you, Jeremy?
And it's nice of you to pull over and talk to us because I know you're out and about.
I certainly am, on my way to graduation for university.
Oh, I thought you were out playing.
No, you're graduating or you're doing another degree or what?
No. I've got a PhD student that's graduating, so you go along and support them.
Oh, I see.
Are they also graduating from play as such?
No, this is social work degree that he did his in, education and social work.
Okay. How did you get to be recognised for the specialty of play?
Well, it isn't actually play per se that I'm recognised for. I'm more recognised for risk-taking, and that's more about what Tuesday was all about. We launched the inaugural Risky Play Day. So, in other words, giving children permission to take risks. But how that all started, Jeremy, you asked the question, how did I get started? I did my PhD on Timbertop, which had a lot of risk-taking within their school curriculum. And then, so that was my PhD way back in the 90s. So I've been taking children or my students, I train teachers to be teachers, into wild places and abseiling, kayaking, hiking, all those sorts of things that we don't really get to do much of nowadays because of our risk-averse society.
Yeah, we've sanitised things and we've taken all the risk and therefore probably a lot of the fun out of so many things. Even playgrounds, we're trying to make them so safe, we just make them boring.
Exactly. Couldn't agree more. That word sanitised is perfect because we're keeping them hermetically sealed from any sort of danger. And in that act of doing that, we're then producing children who later in life have a lot more anxiety and less resilience than what we saw in our day. So it's all about giving permission for the benefits of risk to be, I'd rather have a broken bone than a broken spirit.
Yes.
And that's one thing I tell my students all the time, go rogue, take your classes outside, allow them to take risks because that's where the true learning occurs.
Go rogue.
Yeah,
but
go rogue.
Is it safe? When I'm saying I'm all for what you're saying, but I guess if I was a teacher, I'd be thinking to myself, litigation. If I go out there and I take this class and something happens, something untoward happens, I'm going to find myself in court and I'll lose my job and my house and God knows what. You see, how do we attack this business about putting some risk back into play? How do we do that?
Great question, Jeremy. And the fact that we are so paralysed by litigation is a real issue. And, so how do we go about it? Well, we obviously go through our risk management strategies, but we're now calling it benefit risk assessment so that even we're positively framing everything, that there is always a chance that things can go wrong. But if you're driving home today, you might have an accident as well. But just accepting that risk is inevitable. The only things in life which are a given is you're born and then you'll die, basically. And whatever happens in between is fueled with risk. And our brain develops as a result of risk-taking. In fact, up until the age of 25 years of age, your prefrontal cortex will be developed by the amount of risk-taking and the judgments that you're making.
Yeah.
So I would much prefer my daughter, who's now 33, if she ever got in the car behind, someone who's driving who's intoxicated or whatever, she has the guts to say, I don't feel safe, I'm out of here. And that's what's missing in a lot of our modern childhood is I don't feel safe because I haven't been exposed to these risky things. So therefore it's carte blanche in many ways. And we're seeing the fact that, they're doing antisocial behaviours, either taking drugs, graffiti, stealing cars, the whole lot. That's how they're getting their risks now.
My mother was described as an anxious mother. She worried a lot about her two boys. But even my anxious mother even she understood that Christopher and I, would get up when we were on holidays from school, and we'd get on our bikes, and we would go out in the morning and not come back until dark. And we were allowed to do that, and I don't know whether she trusted us or the world was just a safer place.
Good question, but we had all those unbridled risk-taking opportunities when we were younger, and parents weren't quite as worried that docs or whatever department would be onto them as a result if they weren't doing safe.
Yeah.
So we're all stifled in so many ways about what is normal for a child to do, but we can only become a risk technician if you are exposed to risk. And that's what you were doing, Jeremy, in your childhood. You were taking risk and you knew what it was like to ride that bike from sun up to sundown, but no one worried about where you were. Now we've got the hyper surveillance that's going on where parents track their children on the phone and you go, oh my goodness, childhood is lost. Like, in other words, the art of risk taking is being lost in our society.
Now, Tonya, I've got a question for you, and wrap your head around this concept. The world typically has been very binary in the computer sense, yes or no. So yes, you take the risk, no, you don't take the risk. But on some subjects now, in fact, not some, quite a number of subjects, and you use the word stifle. But in the binary sense, there's a lot of subjects now that are non-binary, like gender, like politics, religion. So how does all that equate and go into the mixing pot in terms of people's attitude towards doing things? Or is there some things now perceived to be okay and some things perceived not to be okay because of societal context?
Yes,
and
most
the law,
definitely.
of course, and the law.
And the law thrown in as well. But I like the question because really we should look at it as a risk continuum. In other words, there's those who prefer to just do bird watching or taking their child to a very sanitised playground, and that's fine. But you should also know that your child will intuit their own risk. So somewhere along that continuum, in incremental steps, they will intuit what they can do next. And you're there basically as a bystander to help. But we're even finding parents don't have the language to embrace risk anymore. When I go to the local playground and I watch their children climb, they don't even know that you've got to have 2 hands and 1 foot, so 3 points of contact when climbing those big, spider web rope things that are in playgrounds now. Yeah. So as soon as you get down to 2 hands or even 1 hand, you're on the cusp of really huge risk taking. So they need to develop the language with their child. Have you got 3 points of contact? If not, let's renegotiate what you're doing. Let's look at things differently. If you've got a plan B here if it doesn't work. So allowing the child to have positive experiences but not stifling them. So it's all about this continuum. So yes, it's not binary. I'm not saying risk is, we've got to allow it. It's somewhere on that gradated scale that you find where you are and your child, and then try and extend.
Yeah, it's kind of like trying to find the dimensions. The extremes. I was talking earlier about watching a child literally running, a toddler running from one wall to another, and it became obvious that what that little kid was doing was experimenting with the space. He was coming up with the experience of knowing how big the room was.
Yeah, and the joy and exhilaration that was probably emanating out of him at that time. But let me just also backtrack. The word kindergarten comes from kids in the garden. But my goodness, we don't even know that. It's been sort of whitewashed out of society. Yeah. But not only that, 1 in 4 children in Australia have never climbed a tree.
Oh, God.
And that is, I know, it's absolutely frightening. Now, is that because they're not exposed to trees in cities? I don't know. Or is it because the schools cut down the lower limbs of the trees so they can't climb? We've turned into quite a crazy society, and we should start to rethink what we're really doing to kids, because in many respects it's an injustice that we're doing.
And Professor, it was the 60s and the 70s, and I've often spoken about this on the show, the counterculture years of people being anti-establishment, anti-war, etc. In your view, where did the continuum break down? What era? Because obviously the risk-taking has not as prevalent as it used to be, and probably you, being the expert in the field, can identify that, was it the 90s or the early 2000s? When did we start to go down the gurgler in terms of all this?
Yeah, also another great question. If I was to pinpoint it, it was when computers came in and we became sedentary and solo, and that we didn't go outside. So when that came in slowly but surely, the curtains came down as well about risk litigation and what a dangerous world we really live in here. But that's in reality proven that modern society is now safer than what it was in the 70s. So yes.
But not necessarily if you're using social media. That's become very dangerous for some. You don't have to leave the home and you can be in great peril.
Yes, and not only that, the what we're calling that is generation overwhelmed. They don't no longer have the ability to navigate risks because they've either seen everything on screen and been bullied on screens or whatever else. My big message is just go outside, get into the real world, unplug, and just get back in touch with what really matters, because at the moment we've become very much addicted to the virtual world. We are sedentary. We don't communicate very well because we're solo in front of that screen, and that's where the bullying comes from as well. But yes, I can see in my students, because I've been teaching now since the late 80s in universities, slowly but surely their risk appetite has really diminished. And in many ways, when I say to them, well, what's the biggest risk you took today? They'll say, Siri didn't work, my navigation didn't work, so that was a really risk-taking. And you go, oh my goodness, if that is what risk is to you, we've really, really lost the plot, haven't we?
We had a previous guest just before you, Professor, was a guy called Tony Clark, who's been very instrumental in filmmaking, and he works heavily into sensory perception. And I think,
special effects.
Not that I would want to criticise him, but when you can go to a cinema and you almost feel like you're falling off the cliff because the computer graphics are that good and the sound system's that good, that almost prevents you from having that sort of experience of diving into the water, because you can almost in the cinema feel it for yourself without doing it.
Virtual reality, yeah.
So we're sort of doing ourselves out of opportunities by substituting technology, if you like, and that's what you've said. The modern computers are taking people away from the opportunity of being out in the, playing in the dirt, playing in the forest, or going for walks, or walking, putting the bare feet into the ocean, etc., etc.
And Professor, when you talk about all of this, what's the reaction you get from students and from parents?
Students, nowadays, when I take them into the wild places, because I always push their limits, they will say things to me, out here I feel alive, back out in suburbia I'm just existing, so that those sorts of things come out of it. Whereas parents, I'm noticing slowly but surely there's a new generation that are saying, I want to be part of this movement. It really sounds right. We've seen that the pendulum has swung too far in one direction. It's got to come back in the other direction if we're going to really do the best thing for childhood growth and development. So I am seeing parents, especially some that are now homeschooling their children or choosing alternate schools for their child, which allows a lot more risk-taking and play and experimentation and curiosity and all those magical ingredients that have somehow or other been dumbed out of the curriculum. It's really sad.
I'm interested in the work that you did at Timbertop, because my youngest boy went to Timbertop. And I'm still a little bit vague as to what the adventures were or what the risks were, but he seemed to like school a lot more than I liked school. What conclusions did you come to about Timbertop?
Well, first of all, I looked at the co-educational, the girls versus boys, and the girls got a lot more out of it than the boys, believe it or not, and the girls made bigger gains. But at any rate, down to things like their physical fitness really improved, their environmental sensitivity, their cooperation, their teamwork. Academics didn't slip back too much, even though they were, a year in the bush away from main school and the curriculum. And generally, parents had a better relationship with their child when they returned as well, because both appreciated one another a lot more as a result of that. So I've got to say, and a lot of schools have followed the same model as Timbertop now, they're getting children into wild places because they know that this teaches resourcefulness, resilience, collaboration, cooperation, and the list goes on. And they're our 21st century skills that employees are calling out for.
Professor, thank you very much for giving us all this valuable time of yours and holding you up from your journey. I hope we haven't made you late. But just finally, is what we have done to play, I mean, taking the risk out of play and the danger out of play, is it similar to what we've done with keeping our kids these days away from germs, making sure they wash their hands, trying to make the world a safe place? I mean, our intentions are good, but we are exposing kids maybe to all sorts of things.
You just got
Tony, did you just cut her off? Did you? Oh, no. No, I'll have to ring. Oh, dear. Is that... Hello?
Hi, that dropped out. Did it matter? Dropped out.
I got you back. No, thank you. I think it was our fault, our end.
Okay.
No,
did you want me to answer that question?
Yes,
or not?
just the idea of trying to make expose ourselves to germs is not a bad thing.
No, it's not a bad thing. And this is the thing. Maybe one of the facts that, back to that sanitisation that you're talking about, could it be that so many children have got allergies now, and could it be it's the fact that we haven't exposed them to all the germs and the microbes and whatever else it is, and our immune system has now become deficient in some ways? Like, these are the hypothetical questions that we need to start asking, and it's where that pendulum, as I keep going back to, has swung in one direction. It's got to come back in the other direction if we're going to see.
It's a good argument, Professor, to advocate for team sports.
Yeah, most definitely.
And physical inclusion.
Have a wonderful weekend, Professor, and thank you again for your time and your wisdom.
No worries. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
All the best. Isn't she wonderful? I would love to have a teacher like that.
Well, very enthusiastic and very committed, and doing interesting things out of the classroom, out of the lecture theatre.
And out of the mould.
And interesting enough, she's condemned our curriculum. Because that's where the problem is, government and curriculum.
Yeah. Professor Tonya Gray, University of Western Sydney.